thought I'd be able to hang up the examination gloves after my review of 2022's The Mortuary Assistant, but Woodland Games has different plans for me with the release of Autopsy Simulator. But does this first-person horror title have a pulse? Or is it stiffer than a corpse after rigor mortis has set in? Let's find out in our full review.
Birthday. I actually forgot it was today. Alice baked me muffins like these every birthday. A treat for later.
Before we get into the review, don't let I Dream of Indie Games end up in an autopsy room. Head over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames and support honest gaming coverage of smaller releases. You'll gain Discord access, early ad-free shows, shoutouts at the end of every video we produce, and even free games depending which tier you select. Your new indie gaming community is waiting for you. In Autopsy Simulator, you play as Jack, a pathologist who not only has a morbid career, but has also suffered the loss of his wife, which has taken a heavy toll on him mentally. All of this is to say, he lives in a pretty bleak world. Jack copes with his loss by taking pills. He is a surprisingly well-written character in a game that has a narrative which really has no business being as enthralling as it is. Autopsy Simulator has great voice performances and some shocking moments that kept me on the edge of my seat throughout.
Okay. I'm gonna have to report this to the police.
That's not a statement I was expecting to make in this review, but dare I say, the game's narrative is good. Watching your lead character enter a downward spiral into his own personal hell is disgustingly satisfying. Autopsy Simulator is broken up into chapters with a limited number of locations. Most of your time will be spent at work dissecting bodies, though players can also expect to spend some time in Jack's apartment, where he's usually trying to fall asleep, drinking, or lamenting over his lost loved one. Sometimes he'll do all three. Autopsy Simulator is an extremely linear experience that will hold your hand through most of its duration, and even go as far as to highlight key objects so that you don't spend too much time wandering. This didn't stop me from bumbling about on a few occasions, but it mostly alleviated that all-too-common problem of aimlessly meandering in video games, so I was personally cool with this design choice. The actual gameplay could best be described as a series of minigames, very grotesque minigames, but minigames nonetheless. These minigames do tend to work best with keyboard and mouse controls. Typically, each new day will involve examining a corpse in hopes of identifying a cause of death. This means everything from sawing their skull and removing their brains for closer examination, to pulling out a liver or stomach and slicing it open. Yeah, I hope you weren't eating while watching this review.
The parenchyma is remarkably pale.
My personal favorite? Using a magnifying glass to get a closer look at wounds, or to maybe see this poor guy's, never mind. Hopefully you don't actually need a magnifying glass for that, at least for his sake. The game has a good variety of tools which helps to keep every examination disturbingly fresh. Jack is also a bit of a psycho and loves to take extremely visceral images and videos of every autopsy. You'll peel back skin, you'll get samples from bladders, and even attempt to get fingerprints to obtain positive identifications. Most of these actions involve simple clicks and glides of the mouse, with very few consequences to worry about for making mistakes. Rather than challenging players with gameplay elements, Autopsy Simulator relies on scares such as power outages and unexpected noises to keep you invested, and it does this successfully. While I personally love a linear narrative experience, one could argue that Autopsy Simulator may go a step too far in that direction. On-screen text directs your next action, important items and points of interest glow as I mentioned previously, and the only real gameplay frustrations you can expect to encounter are through the shortcomings of the game itself. There were quite a few bugs where clicking wouldn't activate an action or open a drawer, or my character would get hung up on the environment. Dialogue also played at the wrong times in a few instances, which made for some seriously awkward moments.
Cramp, heart attack, drugs, homicide, or some accident. Such an analysis requires viewing from different angles and a careful interpretation of the collected data, including those from the field.
None of these issues were game-breaking in any serious way, but it becomes a case of lots of little things starting to add up. Visually, as grotesque as Autopsy Simulator is, you have to respect the attention to detail that's gone into it. Organs look as advertised, environments can sometimes appear photorealistic, and the lighting is quite good at other times, though admittedly far too dark in pivotal moments. There was one section of gameplay where I was struggling to see where I was going, even with the gamma maxed out. Regardless, it's obvious that the developers did their research on the human body. From the grisly wounds of corpses, which can be seen in even better detail through the lens of the game's built-in camera, to the tools themselves, a great deal of attention has gone into making Autopsy Simulator look believable. Players also have the option to censor nudity should they want to appease the YouTube and Twitch overlords, but can also view the full Monty if they so wish. However you end up playing, the anatomy of victims looks incredible. To accompany the morbid visuals is a chilling soundtrack that mostly consists of light ominous piano melodies. Compositions fit the mood perfectly, while the nasty sounds of ripping out a spine or slicing a stomach sound as hideous as they should. Autopsy Simulator is disgustingly beautiful in both its visual and audio design. The voice actor that plays the role of Jack was clearly committed to the part and does a hell of a job putting his own spin on the character, though it does at times sound like he's narrating an adult novel.
Christ. Who leaves the window open in the middle of November? So I'd better check the answering machine.
I'm not sure what being around corpses does to this guy, but I'm starting to think he's a little too into it. As for game performance, on my 4070 I encountered the occasional hitch, but the game mostly ran without issue at high frame rates. This was at a resolution of 1440p with everything at high settings. According to the Steam page, a 2060 is the recommended card, and I probably wouldn't go much lower than that. That said, there is a Steam Deck optimization here, so while running on high settings, I was able to achieve a decent 30 FPS, while dropping the settings down to low got that frame rate up to around 40 or so, but that did come at the sacrifice of some of the finer texture quality for performance. Even still, the game is perfectly playable and the touchpad works quite well, emulating the feel and functionality of a mouse. All told, Autopsy Simulator is pretty playable on Valve's seemingly ageless handheld. I was not a fan of the Mortuary Assistant, the closest game I can compare this one to, but I respected it for trying something different. In the case of Autopsy Simulator, I legitimately enjoyed my time playing and felt like it learned from many of the shortcomings of the game that so clearly inspired it. A surprisingly gripping narrative kept me invested, with the linear gameplay loop keeping the story moving at a nice pace. I loved hating the visuals, if that makes sense, and it sounds absolutely brilliant, as disgusting as it sounds. Sure, the gameplay does come off as a series of mini-games with light exploration elements, and it has its share of bugs, but under closer examination, it becomes nearly impossible to put this game down. I am awarding Autopsy Simulator the Silver Genie Lamp of approval.